He was 11 minutes late. Not 30, not an hour. 11 minutes. He walked in, took his seat, offered an apology to the table. His uncle smiled. His mother passed him the bread. Everyone continued eating as if nothing had happened. But Don Ferrara, who sat at the head of the table and had said nothing from the moment the boy walked in, looked at him once. Just once. Less than 2 seconds. Then looked back down at his plate. In that room, everyone who had been in the family long enough understood exactly what had just happened. An entry had been made. Most people watching this have had a moment like that. Maybe you were the one who arrived late. Maybe you were Don Ferrara. Maybe you were someone else at that table, watching to see what would happen next. What most people miss, what the family understood, and what the boy would spend years learning, is that nothing about that moment was about 11 minutes. It was about what happens after. Every system has a first entry. Before the entry is made, rules are theoretical, written somewhere, agreed upon in principle, understood by everyone in the room. After the entry, something different exists. Something real, something with weight. The boy's name was Enzo. He was 11 years old, and he was late because he had been playing football with the neighborhood kids and lost track of time. His mother knew this. His aunt knew this. His uncle, who smiled when Enzo walked in, knew this. Don Ferrara also knew this. He had been 11 years old once. He had also been late. He had also had a football. None of that was the point. The point was this. The dinner had been called for 7 o'clock. 7 o'clock was not a suggestion. It was the first rule in a household built on rules. And a rule that goes uncorrected once, just once, for any reason, for any reasonable explanation, begins to shift. Not dramatically, not all at once. The way a foundation shifts, slowly, silently, and only noticeable years later when the walls begin to crack. There's a concept in structural engineering called creep. It's the slow, continuous deformation of a material under sustained stress, stress that the material can technically withstand. Nothing breaks. Nothing fails spectacularly. The material simply shifts. When something wrong happens, when someone is late, when a commitment goes unmet, when a line gets crossed, there is a moment, a window, brief, specific, and perishable. In that moment, you have a choice. How you respond in that moment, or whether you respond at all, becomes the first line of a ledger that will be written whether you choose to write it or not. Don Ferrara looked at Enzo once. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make a scene, didn't embarrass the boy in front of the family. He simply let Enzo understand, through one look, held for less than 2 seconds, that the entry had been made. That was enough. There's a reason architects spend more time on foundations than on facades. The facade is what people see. The foundation is what determines whether the building is still standing in 20 years. Every relationship has a foundation. Not the foundation of love or trust or shared values, although those matter. The foundation I'm talking about is structural. What behavior is acceptable in this space and what is not? This foundation isn't built through conversations about values. It's not built through agreements made over dinner or promises made in good faith. It's built through pattern. Specifically, through what gets corrected and what gets passed. Every time something gets corrected, calmly, proportionally, without drama, the foundation firms. Every time something gets passed, rationalized away, ignored for the sake of harmony, left unaddressed because the moment seemed too small, something else happens. The line blurs, the standard softens, and the foundation shifts fractionally toward whatever shape the past thing represents. Nobody announces this. Nobody votes on it. There is no meeting, no memo, no formal decision. Just the slow accumulation of what was allowed. Consider the ordinary workplace, not the dramatic stories of corporate collapse. Those are exceptions. They're exceptions because they required years of small things going unchallenged before the large thing became possible. The meeting didn't change because people became less professional. The meeting changed because the first late start went uncorrected. In that silence, the first entry was made. Not by the manager, by the room. Tell someone that respect matters. They'll nod. They'll agree. They may even genuinely believe you. Then let the first disrespect go unchallenged. Watch what they believe after that. Every relationship operates under a contract, not the contract you sign, not the vows you speak out loud. There is another contract, an invisible one, written in behavior, ratified in repetition, enforced or not, through response. This contract is more binding than any document, because you agreed to it not when you signed your name. You agreed to it in every moment you stayed silent when something in you wanted to speak. Every time you let something pass, you signed another line. There was a Don in a mid-sized American city who ran his territory for nearly 30 years without a single significant internal challenge to his authority. Not because he was feared, he was respected. There's a difference. Fear creates compliance. Respect creates alignment. Fear means people behave when they think they're being watched. Respect means people behave because they understand what they're part of. He never let anything go, not the small things. Never the small things. Not the small things. These are tests, not malicious ones necessarily. Human beings test the limits of their environments constantly. It's how we map the space we're in. We push gently to find where the walls are. If there's no wall, we don't stop. We just keep walking. He wasn't harsh. By all accounts, he was gracious, generous to those who served him well, patient with mistakes that were genuine. But he was utterly precise about one thing. The first time something happened, he noted it. The second time something happened, he addressed it. Quietly, specifically, without anger, without an audience. There was no third time. Not because of what would happen, because of what it would mean about the person if there were a third time. That's not a mistake. That's a decision. And decisions are entered differently in the ledger than mistakes. There is a cost to letting things slide. It doesn't present itself as a cost at the moment of the decision. At the moment of the decision, letting things slide feels like wisdom, like emotional maturity, like choosing your battles, like being the bigger person in the room. These are reasonable thoughts. Sometimes they're even true. But sometimes they're not maturity. Sometimes they're avoidance wearing maturity's clothes. Nothing important happens suddenly. The collapse was prepared, entry by entry, silence by silence, smile by smile at things that should not have been smiled at. "I saw all of it," he said. "I saw it as it was happening. I kept thinking it would stabilize on its own." It didn't stabilize. Because things don't stabilize on their own. They normalize. Stabilization means the problem stops getting worse. Normalization means the problem stops being perceived as a problem. It gets absorbed into the baseline understanding of how things work. And when you finally try to address it, years too late, you're not correcting a mistake. You're attacking something that has become, to everyone around you, the established order. You can't have a conversation with a culture. You can only build one, entry by entry, response by response, correction by correction. Or you can let one build itself in your presence, in the silence of your non-response. The question is not whether you're building it right now. You are. The question is whether you know it. The most dangerous misconception about maintaining standards is this: that the alternative to letting things slide is confrontation. It isn't. Confrontation is one response, and usually the wrong one. It conflates the message with the emotion of the person delivering it. People who are confronted often defend. People who are calmly, precisely corrected, without anger, without drama, without an audience, often simply understand. Don Ferrara's look lasted less than 2 seconds. No confrontation, no conversation. But Enzo understood, and Enzo never arrived late again. The correction has to happen at the first entry, not the second, not the third, because the first entry is when the correction feels most disproportionate. That's exactly when it needs to happen. When it's still small enough that the correction can be small. Just an entry, in response to an entry. The longer you wait, the larger the correction required. And the larger the correction required, the more disproportionate it appears to the room. To them, you're not correcting a deviation. You're attacking an established norm. The window for correction is real. It opens at the first entry, and it closes, slowly but certainly, with every subsequent entry that goes unanswered. A correction delivered a week after the fact is not a correction. It's a grievance. Corrections address behavior. Grievances address the person. Corrections keep the relationship intact. Grievances damage it, sometimes permanently. The difference between them is 2 things: timing and temperature. Timing, as close to the moment as possible. Temperature, as low as the situation allows. One closes the entry. The other opens something much harder to close. Enzo grew up in that family. By the time he was in his 30s, he was running part of the operation. By the time he was in his 40s, he was the one at the head of a different table. The people who sat at his table said the same things about him that had been said about Don Ferrara. He never let anything go, not the small things, never the small things. Not because he had been formally taught the principle, not because it was written anywhere, but because he had been in the room when Don Ferrara looked at him. That look lasted less than 2 seconds. He had been carrying it for 30 years. The ledger is always open, whether you are aware of it or not. An accounting is being kept. of what you allow, what you address, what you pass in silence, and what you make foundational. You are not being judged by it. You are being shaped by it. What you let pass becomes the rule. Not always, not immediately. But over time, with repetition, in the absence of correction, yes, structure is not something that happens to you. Structure is something you build, deliberately or by default. The question is not whether you are building it right now. You are. The question is whether you know it.